We usually think of kindness as a virtue, a quality we strive for in our own lives, but in the morally ambiguous worlds of Dostoevsky, kindness can become a weapon of self-destruction. Characters that exhibit pure-hearted compassion often find themselves manipulated, betrayed, or ruined. So what do we make of this? Is kindness a dangerous trait? Can it ever be a flaw? In this video, we're going to explore one of the most compelling and tragic aspects of Fyodor Dostoevsky's novels, kindness, and how sometimes it makes us fools. Dostoevsky's characters are some of the most complex in all of literature, and he delves deep into the human psyche to show us the pitfalls in compassion, especially when it's taken to extremes. Now, let's unravel some of Dostoevsky's most fascinating characters, examine the dark side of kindness, and see what life lessons we can extract from his stories. Grab a comfortable seat, and let's dive into the world of Dostoevsky. Chapter 1: The Paradox of Kindness in Dostoevsky's World. Dostoevsky's novels are not stories about simple black and white morality. His characters don't live in a world where kindness is always rewarded, and neither do we. As readers, we find comfort in the predictable outcomes we might expect from more conventional stories. Instead, Dostoevsky's works constantly challenge us to rethink what kindness really means, and whether it can be truly virtuous when the world seems so cruel and indifferent. In his novels, kindness often comes with a price, whether it's the suffering of the characters themselves or the pain they unknowingly cause others. This tension forms the heart of Dostoevsky's exploration of the human condition. His characters want to be good, they want to be compassionate, but they often discover that the world doesn't reward such goodness in simple ways. This paradox of kindness is apparent across his body of work. For instance, in The Brothers Karamazov, Alyosha Karamazov, the spiritual idealist, embodies the best of human kindness, but he too faces a world filled with suffering and cruelty that continually tests his resolve. Yet it's not the characters who suffer from kindness. It's also the readers who are forced to confront the idea that sometimes kindness, when extended without wisdom or understanding of the complexities of life, can make us vulnerable. Dostoevsky's world forces us to reconsider the nature of kindness itself. Is it always a good thing? Can it be dangerous? And if so, how should we approach kindness in our own lives, especially when we live in a world that seems to take advantage of our best qualities? Chapter 2: The Tragic Idealism of Prince Myshkin and the Idiot. To understand Dostoevsky's portrayal of kindness as both a virtue and a vulnerability, we need to take a close look at one of his most famous characters, Prince Myshkin from The Idiot. Prince Myshkin is an extraordinary example of pure-hearted goodness. He's a man whose kindness seems boundless. He never judges others, always believes in the good in people, and has a deep empathy for the suffering of those around him. At first, Myshkin's innocence is almost refreshing. In a world filled with cynicism and moral corruption, his untainted soul stands out like a beacon of hope. But as we read further into the novel, we see how his purity becomes his curse. His kindness isn't met with gratitude or admiration. Instead, it is used against him. People take advantage of him, manipulate him, and even mock him for his inability to understand the darker side of human nature. Let's take a look at Myshkin's relationship with Nastasia Filipovna, a beautiful but deeply troubled woman with a tragic history. Nastasia represents everything that is damaged and broken in society, and she exploits Myshkin's kindness for her own purposes. She knows that he's incapable of seeing her faults, and uses that against him, pushing him into a tragic love triangle that ultimately leads to his mental collapse. Myshkin's idealism is beautiful, but it blinds him. He doesn't see the manipulation happening right in front of him, because he believes that everyone is capable of goodness, if only given the chance. His inability to discern evil from good, his inability to protect himself emotionally, and his overwhelming compassion are the very things that led him to ruin. His kindness turns into a vulnerability, and in the end, it makes him a fool. What we learn from Myshkin is that while it's noble to be kind, a lack of awareness and the inability to set boundaries can turn kindness into a form of self-destruction. Myshkin's tragic end is not the result of his goodness, but the consequence of his inability to recognize when kindness needs to be tempered with caution and wisdom. Chapter 3: Raskolnikov's internal struggle with compassion in crime and punishment. Let's now turn to another iconic character in Dostoevsky's repertoire, Rodion Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov is the opposite of Prince Myshkin. He's intellectual, cynical, and he believes that morality is for the weak. He commits a murder, convinced that he can justify it for the greater good. But while Raskolnikov is not immediately associated with kindness, it's his internal struggle with compassion that ultimately leads to his downfall and redemption. Raskolnikov's belief in his own superiority makes him blind to the humanity of others. He views people like Sonia Marmeladov, a woman driven to prostitution to support her family, as weak, pitiable creatures. But as Raskolnikov spends more time with Sonia, he begins to see a side of her that he hadn't expected. Despite the crushing weight of her circumstances, she is unyieldingly kind and compassionate. Sonia's moral purity and willingness to endure suffering for the sake of others begin to affect Raskolnikov in ways he can't understand. At first, Raskolnikov rejects Sonia's kindness. He's embarrassed by it, even disdainful of it. But slowly he begins to realize that his own intellectual arrogance has kept him from recognizing a deeper truth, that true strength often comes in the form of compassion. Sonia represents the kind of love that can endure even in the face of profound suffering, and it is this love that forces Raskolnikov to confront his own crime. Raskolnikov's journey is a fascinating study of how kindness, specifically the kindness of others, can be transformative. But it's also a story of how kindness, when it isn't rooted in real understanding of human suffering, can cause moral confusion. Raskolnikov's struggle with his own guilt and the kindness of those around him leads him to a kind of moral awakening. But it's only through facing the consequences of his crime and confronting his own darkness that he can begin to understand the true power of compassion. What Dostoevsky seems to be suggesting here is that kindness alone is not enough to navigate the complexities of life. It must be accompanied by awareness, humility, and a deep understanding of the human condition. In Raskolnikov's case, it is through the kindness of others that he is ultimately able to find redemption. But this kindness does not come without suffering. For Raskolnikov, as for Myshkin, kindness is not the simple answer. It's part of a much more complicated process of moral reckoning. Chapter 4. The Spiritual Strength of Kindness. Throughout Dostoevsky's works, we see two sides of kindness, one that leads to destruction and one that leads to salvation. This duality is what makes Dostoevsky's exploration of kindness so complex and so compelling. In The Brothers Karamazov, Alyosha Karamazov, another of Dostoevsky's deeply kind characters, embodies this second kind of kindness. Alyosha is pure in his faith and compassion. He believes in the inherent goodness of humanity, and he strives to live a life that helps others. But unlike Myshkin, Alyosha's kindness is tempered by wisdom. He's seen the suffering in the world. He's witnessed the moral decay of his family and society. But rather than retreating into cynicism, Alyosha chooses to meet this darkness with an unwavering faith in love and kindness. Alyosha's kindness is not naive. It's grounded in a deep understanding of the complexities of life. He recognizes the evil in the world, but he chooses to counter it with love, even when it seems like love can't possibly make a difference. His kindness is active, not passive. It's a conscious choice, made despite the suffering he sees around him. And this is what makes him different from Myshkin. His kindness doesn't make him a fool, it makes him a spiritual force for good. Through Alyosha, Dostoevsky suggests that kindness, when grounded in wisdom, can be a source of spiritual strength. It can be a tool for redemption, not only for others but for ourselves. But this kind of kindness requires sacrifice, self-awareness, and a deep understanding of the nature of suffering. So when does kindness make you a fool? From Dostoevsky's characters, we learn that kindness is dangerous when it's blind, when it lacks discernment, self-awareness, and a realistic understanding of the complexities of the world. Myshkin's innocence is beautiful, but it's also his undoing. Raskolnikov's arrogance blinds him to the goodness in others, and it's only when he confronts his guilt that he begins to understand the true nature of kindness. Dostoevsky's novels show us that kindness, while powerful, is not enough on its own. It must be tempered with wisdom, boundaries, and a deep awareness of suffering. Kindness without these qualities can lead to exploitation, moral confusion, and, ultimately, destruction. But at the same time, Dostoevsky shows us that kindness, when paired with wisdom and a deep understanding of life's suffering, can be a force for redemption. Whether it's Sonia's unwavering compassion, Alyosha's spiritual love, or Raskolnikov's eventual moral awakening, kindness, if approached wisely, becomes a transformative power on the world. So, how do we approach kindness in our own lives? The lesson here is simple. Kindness is essential, but it's not always easy. It requires discernment, strength, and wisdom. Kindness must be an active choice, not a passive response to the world's suffering. It requires us to understand when to give and when to protect ourselves, when to love and when to set boundaries. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Dostoevsky's exploration of kindness, leave a like, comment with your thoughts, and make sure to subscribe for more content. Take care, and remember, kindness is powerful, but it's even stronger when paired with wisdom.